This is Booked for Drama, where stories burn, hearts break. The tea is always hot and never a part 2. Today we're diving into The Priceless Wife. Let's go. Chapter 1. The year her family went bankrupt, Molly Pearson sold herself into the Pollard family to pay the debt. At Melissa Pollard's insistence, she married her only son, Troy Pollard. But Troy had someone he loved, Aurora Lynch, even willing to give up his heirship for her. Melissa threatened suicide to force the wedding. On the day Molly and Troy married, Aurora had a flash marriage and flew overseas. Troy sped after her and crashed, missing the only chance to stop her. From then on, every ounce of pain he felt over the love he missed, he pinned on Molly. From that day forward, everything about Molly had a price tag. First year of marriage, Troy fired every domestic worker and made Molly do all the housework, $1 per task. She worked around the clock until her back gave out, leaving her shaking from the pain on rainy days. Second year of marriage, when the Pollards opened a new mall, Molly was called in to play the piano, $10 per piece. She played for 3 straight months, until her fingers bled and her wrist fractured. Third year of marriage, Molly's father fell from a building and needed emergency surgery. She had no choice but to beg Troy. He made her down high-proof wine in public, $100 a glass in exchange for the surgical fees. Cigarette smoke curled through the air. Troy's handsome, sculpted face blurred at the edges, his expression edged with mockery. Molly stood in the wash of the heater and still shivered. Her throat burned. When she spoke, her voice rasped to nothing. "Troy, I'm allergic to alcohol. Can we?" "No." His voice was arctic. He crushed out the cigarette and looked at her with a hatred she understood. "From the moment you set my mother against me, forced me into this marriage, and drove Aurora away, you lost the right to bargain." He tipped his chin at the glass. "Drink. However much you drink is how much I'll pay." Laughter and contempt flicked at her from every direction. Molly's heart sank, and kept sinking. But time was running out. She had no choice. She shut her eyes, then opened them again, and her face went still. "Fine, I'll drink." She took up the glass in one hand, the bottle in the other, pouring and swallowing, over and over again. Her father was in critical condition, having internal bleeding, so she was in urgent need of a lot of money. She drank 10 grand a bottle red wine like chugging water. Soon her limbs went numb and her breath turned thin. Still she kept going. Empty bottles piled into a small mountain. Troy's expression grew darker, the hand on his knee fisting so hard his knuckles blanched. When Molly couldn't breathe, the glass slipped from her fingers and shattered. She crouched, coughing so hard blood seeped through her fingers. Even then she reached for another glass. Troy finally stood and clamped a hand around her wrist, the mockery in his eyes scorching. "Molly," he said softly, cruelly, "when you schemed your way into this marriage, did you imagine the day you'd wag your tail like a dog for a few thousand in hospital fees?" He squeezed as if he meant to grind bone to dust. Molly's calm never cracked. 999 glasses, she said evenly. "Transfer the money to my account." He said nothing, only looked at her, something complicated flickering in his eyes. As the air went heavy, his phone rang. He answered, and his assistant's excited voice came through the speaker. "Mr. Pollard, Ms. Lynch has divorced and is flying back. She lands in 30 minutes. Troy's eyes lit. He shoved Molly aside and strode out without hesitation. Molly held on as long as she could, then vomited a mouthful of blood in great pain. People gasped and scattered, but Troy never paused. She gave a faint, bitter smile and blacked out. When she woke, her throat felt seared by a red-hot brand. Pain stole her voice. A nurse leaned over, worried. "Ms. Pearson, the alcohol triggered severe laryngeal edema and a gastric hemorrhage. There may be lasting effects." Molly wasn't surprised. If anything, she felt relief. At least her father's surgery would be covered. Then her father's attending physician called. Regret weighed his voice. "I'm sorry, Ms. Pearson. Your father passed away 5 minutes ago. Please accept our condolences." The words slammed into Molly's chest like a hammer. The pain was almost suffocating. She ran towards her father's ward, tears blurring everything. just in time to see the doctor pull a white sheet over his face. Her foot twisted, she nearly collapsed, barely managing to kneel by her father's bedside, sobbing uncontrollably. "I'm so sorry, but we couldn't operate," the doctor said with great pity. "There were no funds in his account. We did everything we could." Molly's head snapped up, her voice trembling. "I had money transferred." Bewildered, the staff shook their heads. Hands shaking, Molly opened her father's hospital account and refreshed it over and over. The balance stayed at zero. After she'd arranged for the morgue, she called Troy again and again. He finally picked up on the 123rd attempt. "You promised," she cried, throat tearing. "You promised if I drank you'd pay for my father's surgery. Why didn't you?" Silence, then the faintest, guilty hitch of breath. "Do you understand?" A cramping pain spread in her chest, her voice twisted. "Because you didn't send it. My father. 3 years on and you're still this mercenary." A cool woman's voice cut in, tinged with disappointment and displeasure. "You married into the Pollards for money, and now you can't stop talking about money. Mrs. Pearson, if you're really Troy's wife, try to show some poise. You can't weigh everything in cash. It's so vulgar." Hearing such a condescending tone, Molly lost her temper. "That was my father's life. Enough." Troy's voice sliced through. "I didn't send it because you didn't drink enough, let alone you broke 2 bottles of my best wine. Rules are rules, Molly. You didn't meet them, then don't blame anyone else." A ping sounded. Molly glanced down. Troy had transferred her $1. Chapter 2. Happy now? Troy's tone dripped scorn. "Your father fell from the 2nd floor. How bad could it be? Don't be greedy." A chill spread from Molly's heart. Before she could answer, a jeweler came from the other line, addressing him with deference. "Mr. Pollard, this star and moon necklace, worth 10 million, suits Ms. Lynch perfectly." Aurora's voice lifted, airy with refusal. "Troy, I told you I don't like trinkets. And I'm not rushing into a new relationship. Love is exhausting. I'm going to live for myself." Troy chuckled, indulgent. "Then let this be my gift to celebrate your divorce." Then he hung up, showing not a bit of concern to Molly. Molly stared at the dead screen until her tears ran dry. A necklace he tossed to Aurora, 10 million. Her father's life, $1. She forced herself to file the death certificate. The doctor tried to comfort her. "Ms. Pearson, your father jumped from the 10th floor. He meant to die. Even with surgery, he might have been a vegetable. Don't carry all the blame." It felt like an ice pick churning in her heart, the pain turning her pale. Troy had one thing wrong: she wasn't greedy. Selling herself to the Pollards had been the only way to keep her last remaining parent from the brink. Now, the money she'd scraped together over 3 years, plus the insurance payout, finally covered the Pearsons' debt. In the end, she paid it back with her father's life. So be it. At least she and Troy would be square. It was time to go. Molly booked a flight for 2 weeks out. She would disappear to a country where no one knew her and spend whatever life remained free. Over the next 3 days, her feed and the news filled with Troy and Aurora. Day 1. Troy bought Aurora a mountain inn. Aurora posted her divorce decree with the caption, "From now on, I love only myself." Molly finished the funeral and buried her father beside the mother who had died in childbirth. Day 2. Troy donated 2 libraries to Aurora's alma mater. Aurora posted a photo from her keynote, captioned, "Women need hard skills if they want real respect." Molly collapsed from grief and exhaustion and had to be resuscitated. Day 3. Troy purchased a private yacht for Aurora. Aurora posted a photo of herself reading on the yacht with a caption, "Money and love are external things. I want only this slice of horizon at sea." Molly withdrew the insurance money and went to the old Pollard estate to hand Melissa the card. "You've stayed with Troy 3 years, Melissa said, searching Molly's face. "You're sure you want to leave?" "I am." Molly nodded firmly. "Aurora is back, and he still loves her. I should make room." Finding no crack in Molly's calm, Serena only sighed. "Years ago I nearly drowned. Your mother dragged me out. That's why I helped when your family went under. I hoped you and Troy would make a life, but it seems he still can't let go of Aurora." Since you never registered the marriage or finished the wedding ceremony, you are free to leave if you wish. Molly thanked her and headed home. She had barely stepped out of the taxi when a cloth clamped over her mouth and everything went black. Chapter 3. When she came to, her wrists were tied and she lay on a cold floor. Across from her stood Troy and Aurora, faces calm. "Troy," Molly asked, blood throbbing behind her eyes, "why am I here?" "Aurora wants a rare manuscript. Only Cameron Smith has one. He asked to trade you for it." Shadow pulled in the hollows of Troy's fine features. His eyes held nothing, no fury, no pity, only the flat appraisal reserved for goods on a loading dock. Molly reeled. Cameron Smith was the hidden hand who'd snapped the Pearsons' cash flow and driven him into bankruptcy. "A book matters more than my name, than my life." Her voice shook. Aurora frowned slightly, as if correcting a child. "Mrs. Pearson, you can't put it that way. Reputation, at the end of the day, is just about power and money. It counts for nothing compared to knowledge." Molly's laugh came out jagged. Aurora's head-to-toe look had been custom work by a private atelier, $500,000 walking. The hypocrisy would have been funny if it weren't so obscene. Yet, Troy nodded along. That manuscript got Aurora so hooked that she lost her appetite. "Molly, it was you that drove her away back then. You owe her. This settles it." His face blurred in Molly's vision. She had never imagined he would hate her enough to wish her dead. Thank God she had stayed clear-headed these 3 years. She had never loved him. There was nothing left to break. When she stopped resisting, Troy mistook it for consent and his brow eased. "Don't worry, I'll pick you up tomorrow," he said softly, as if comforting. "And I'll find the best doctor for your father." At the word father, pain needled through her. Her mouth twisted. "No need. He already." The door opened. A man she knew all too well walked in. Aurora went straight to him and offered her hand. "Here she is, Mr. Smith." "The book, of course. Ms. Lynch, a pleasure doing business." Cameron passed her a volume. Molly saw it clearly, something you could buy for a few bucks from any street cart. Aurora flipped a page or two, then turned for the door with Troy. "Troy," panic jolted through Molly. "Don't leave me here. My lecture is about to start." Aurora's calm urging cut her off. "We'll be late." Troy, thus, ignored Molly and followed Aurora out. The door shut. Molly's heart dropped through the floor. Cameron's grin split wide as he stepped in and clamped her chin between his fingers, turning her face left and right. His rough thumb lingered at her skin. "My dear Molly, you refused to go with me back then and sold yourself to the Pollards. But now your own husband delivers you to me." What a joke. At her coming-of-age party, Cameron had groped her driven by alcohol and her father had thrashed him. From then on, the two families became enemies. If she hadn't married into the Pollards, Cameron would have devoured her the moment the Pearsons fell. Now the man she had shared a bed with for 3 years had handed her to the devil. With her wrists bound, she had no leverage. Cameron tore her dress and forced her into a degrading pose while he took hundreds of photos. His hands slid like snakes, his mouth pressed to her skin. Revulsion churned through her and sharpened her thoughts. While he checked the photos, Molly drove her knee hard into his groin. He screamed and crumpled, rolling on the floor. Guards burst in and blocked every exit. Cornered, Molly bolted to the window. She gauged the drop 3 stories, sucked in a breath, and jumped. Chapter 4. Bang! Molly crashed onto the roof of the car. Blood spread beneath her like a thin red stream. When she opened her mouth, more blood poured out. Her body slid down the metal and stopped at the edge of the windshield, face to face with the stunned eyes of the driver, Troy. "Molly!" Troy jolted, shoved the door open, and rushed to check her. Panic and fear, emotions Molly had never seen on him, flashed starkly across his face. The world seemed to mute. Molly could hear nothing but Troy's ragged breathing. He reached for her, but the moment his fingers met the thick, sticky blood, he recoiled as if pricked by needles. His voice shook. She couldn't tell whether he was speaking to her or to himself. "I'm calling an ambulance right now. You're going to be fine." Molly let out a broken laugh, then coughed so hard the blood choked her. She wanted to say, "Stop pretending, Troy." You're the one who handed me to that devil. But she couldn't make a sound. Her life was draining fast. The cold gnawed through her. Her teeth chattered uncontrollably as she bled out. Far away, then closer, the wail of sirens drew near, and she fixed her fading hope on the stretcher. That was when Aurora, who had been silent the whole time, suddenly cried out. Aurora cradled her right arm. A small cut on her forearm was oozing blood. Troy went rigid with alarm. He scooped Aurora up and sprinted toward the ambulance. His voice rang out, sharper and more urgent than Molly had ever heard it. Doctor, she has a clotting disorder. Get her to the hospital now. The medic frowned. The woman on the roof is in far more critical condition. Troy hesitated for just a heartbeat. Then Aurora's head lolled to the side as if she'd passed out. His doubt vanished. I'm the fallen woman's husband. I'm authorizing you to take the one in my arms first. Unable to argue with him, the medic had to load Aurora onto the ambulance first. In the blur of rushing bodies, Molly's gaze met Aurora's. Those calm eyes held distant indifference, the kind you spare for a stray mutt you've decided to abandon. Something inside Molly gave way. Darkness swallowed her. When she surfaced to the steady beep of machines, she was in a VIP hospital room, wrapped head to toe in tight bandages. Any movement tore through her like knives. A nurse checked her vitals. Ms. Pearson, you have a fractured calf and 2 broken ribs. Fortunately, your life isn't in danger. Molly had no strength left. She nodded thanks and closed her eyes. Not long after the nurse left, voices drifted in from outside. Ms. Lynch only got a little cut from the windshield, and Mr. Pollard stood over her personally for a whole day and night. But Ms. Pearson is badly hurt and he still hasn't come by. Guess she's not the favorite. It's hard to say. Do you know the man who hurt Ms. Pearson came into the Heir today? He suffered comminuted fractures cause Mr. Pollard broke all 4 of his limbs personally. I heard him tell the doctors, don't treat him too carefully. Just make sure he's alive. Ms. Pearson still means something to him. Listening, Molly's heartbeat didn't so much as ripple. If Troy truly cared, he wouldn't have thrown her to the hell over a damned book. He was cleaning up only because his wife's title had embarrassed him. For 3 days Molly stayed to recover. Troy, meanwhile, cleared his schedule to escort Aurora everywhere. He invited more than 100 scholars to mount a classics exhibition in her name, poured money into commissioning top designers to make her over 100 haute couture. Even because she'd recently taken an interest in coffee, he sourced rare varieties from around the world for her to sample. Molly glanced at the headlines and put her phone face down. She'd once had a world of hobbies too. Dad had done everything to nurture them so she could live a richer life. After the Pearsons went bankrupt and she married into the Pollards, chores filled every day. Troy resented her and vetoed any attempt to bring a little beauty into the house he'd call even a potted flower vulgar. This had never felt like home. 9 days more, and she'd be gone for good, free and reborn. Chapter 5. Molly signed her discharge papers herself. She went straight to the police and filed an injury report, formally accusing Cameron for what he'd done. By the time she finished, her strength was spent. She dragged her exhausted body back to the Pollard estate. The code she entered kept flashing, incorrect. After several tries she had no choice but to knock. The next second, a tub of ice-cold water crashed down from above and drenched her to the bone. Ah! Molly screamed, shaking violently as the cold knifed through her. Troy strode out from the villa at the shout. He took in the mess in the courtyard, then looked at Molly with a flicker of actual concern. He turned to the guards posted on the 2nd floor, a rare edge in his tone. What the hell is going on? What did you do? For the first time, Troy was this openly angry over something that had happened to Molly. The guards faltered and glanced at Aurora, who had followed Troy outside. Molly frowned and looked over too. Aurora wore a bespoke dress, her posture elegant, resembling a proud white swan. Her expression was cool. Ms. Pearson has been through misfortune and carries ill luck. I thought I'd perform a cleansing blessing for her. The water we used consists of nutritious ingredients that cost me. It's good for her body and mind. If you don't believe me, then forget it. The calm tone didn't soften the sting in Molly's ears. She opened her mouth to retort, but Aurora was already turning away. Troy, flustered, made the call on the spot. If Aurora intended well, then let it be. Molly stared at him. Troy, I'm still injured. Give her a hand, he said to the guards. Then he hurried after Aurora. Orders given. 2 guards pinned Molly by the arms and kept dousing her. This time it wasn't only cold water it reeked, a foul brew of mixed unknown chemicals. 1 bucket, 2, 3. Breathing grew difficult. Pain grated through her lungs like a dull blade. Waves of nausea rolled. By the 10th bucket she was nearly blacking out. The guards let her drop like a rag onto the stones. She clawed her way inside, collapsed by the toilet, and retched until her throat tore. She hadn't eaten. In the end only bile and blood came up. Reflex tears blurred her vision. She felt all strength had left her body and fainted. When she woke again, it was the small hours before dawn. She forced herself into the shower, dumped every piece of clothing she'd worn into the trash, cleaned and dressed the surgical scar that had gotten infected, and knocked it out again. A door slammed open with a bang, and jolted her awake. Aurora stopped at the foot of the bed and, from a safe distance, tossed a folder onto Molly's blanket. Sign it. Her voice was light, like another word would dirty her mouth. Molly turned to look. It read, Letter of Leniency. A laugh broke from her, sharp with pain. She pressed a hand to her ribs, pushed herself upright, and met Aurora's eyes head on. On what grounds? Aurora's lips parted slightly. You didn't suffer any real loss. Why cling and sour everyone's mood? Sign the leniency letter so Troy won't pursue Mr. Smith's responsibility. Molly didn't flinch. And in your view, what counts as loss? Chapter 6. Because of your precious book, I was humiliated. If I hadn't reacted in time, I would have been assaulted. Her gaze was ice and fire. Is that heavy enough for you? Does it finally meet your standard of loss? Aurora actually recoiled, fingers curling tight. The door opened. Troy walked in. Aurora looked at him, pride and resolve bright in her eyes. Troy, I agreed to stay friends with you on one condition: you'd help me secure the second half of those antique manuscripts for my research. Because Ms. Pearson is being uncooperative, I have only half a set. Are you going to fix it, or not? Troy nodded without a beat. Only then did Aurora continue. Good. Have Ms. Pearson sign the leniency letter, and Mr. Smith will give me the remaining volumes. This time, Troy didn't immediately agree. He paused, gaze complicated as it shifted to Molly. Her stomach dropped. Troy, don't tell me you're actually going to force me to sign that. He wavered, then looked back at Aurora, clearly torn. Troy, Aurora said softly, you asked me to stay. You promised to help me realize my dream. Now you're the one breaking your word. In 3 short years you've deceived me twice. Is this what your vaunted devotion amounts to? The disappointment in her eyes burned him. She brushed past, heading for the door. Something in him snapped to one side. He turned to Molly, picked up the document. Sign it, then this ends. Molly stared, disbelief turning her cold. It's just a damned book, Troy. If Aurora wants it, it matters. He cut her off. Molly, the video and photos Cameron took were in my hands now. You can refuse, but you may not be able to afford the price. He tapped his phone. Familiar screams and filthy laughter spilled from the speaker. The nightmare surged back, hot and suffocating. Molly's hands shook. She snatched the pen and the letter, her voice shredded. I'll sign. She scrawled her name, flung the papers at him, and fell back against the pillow. Happy now? The words drifted from her lips like a breeze. Something like remorse flickered through Troy's eyes, then he looked away. He handed the letter to Aurora. A faint, satisfied smile touched her mouth. Our restoration work on the manuscripts will be grateful for your help, Troy. She hesitated, color rising to her cheeks. And so will I. Flustered by her own words, she turned and strode out. Troy replayed that last line in his head and smiled, indulgent, and followed after her. Molly gave a bleak smile and blacked out. Fever and infection dragged her under for days. On the 3rd day, the fever broke. She got up, gathered her personal items. For 3 years, she had lived in this house like a ghost. She'd arrived with one small suitcase, she would leave with the same. As for the odds and ends she'd used here, she packed them in a box and dropped it straight into the trash. Chapter 7. Molly returned to the old Pearson home to sort through her father's things. She would hand the property to the older relatives to manage. But the memories with her parents, those she would carry with her for the rest of her life. The house was quiet and cold. Her chest felt crowded with too many tastes at once. It was the first time she'd stepped into Dad's study since the bankruptcy. The moment she began cleaning, the image of his ruined body surfaced and wouldn't let go. She kept having to stop, to breathe, to steady her hands. 2 days later, near the end, she wiped a desk ornament on her father's table. With a heavy clunk, a section of bookshelf slid back, revealing a hidden, padlocked box. Molly froze for a second, then fetched a hammer and broke it open. Inside lay a file she had never seen. She read page after page, pulse running wild. The contents pointed straight at the fall of the Pearsons. Pressing down her panic, she called a private investigator she trusted and asked him to dig into it. As she left the house, her father's former assistant rang, agitation tight in his voice. "Miss, bad news about the amusement park Mr. Pearson built for you. Mr. Pollard brought a crew and is tearing it down." Something seized in Molly's chest. She drove for the park. It was more than a park. It was her childhood with them. Her parents had built it when she was born. When she was 5, her mother died in childbirth, mother and infant both lost. Every year after, her father would take Molly to the park to remember the days when there had been 3 of them. It had fallen into disuse, yes, but sometimes she still went to sit there. Only there could she find a moment's peace. And now Troy was demolishing it. Who gave him the right? Molly ran through the gates just in time to see workers breaking apart the angel statue carved in her mother's image. "Stop! Stop it!" Her ragged scream vanished beneath the roar of the machines. She had no choice but to throw herself in front of a swinging arm of steel. It missed her by a centimeter. Troy, overseeing the sight, saw her and sprinted over, yanking her back. Alarm and aftershock reel, unguarded, flashed across his face. "Molly, are you insane? Did you get hurt?" She slapped his hand away and pointed to the rubble-strewn grounds, pain burning in her eyes. "Who's insane here? Who gave you permission to destroy the park my parents left me?" Troy looked guilty and forced his voice gently. "Aurora wants to open a manuscript restoration studio in the city. This is the best location. Don't worry, I'll choose a new site and rebuild the park for you exactly, down to the last detail." "I don't want it," Molly shot back, voice rising. "Who are you to decide for me? I have power. Ms. Pearson, you're too impulsive." Aurora's voice cut cleanly across hers. "It will bring misfortune. As Troy's wife, you should moderate your desires and cultivate restraint. To cling to shallow pleasures is the worst of all. I had this place cleared for your own good." She pressed a button on the controller in her hand. A blast boomed in the distance. "No!" Molly's voice was a heartbroken cry. She lunged and snatched the controller, but it was too late. One detonation after another thundered across the grounds. She could only watch as everything turned to ruin. She could no longer hold back. Her palm cracked across Aurora's cheek. Her voice tore out, raw and furious. "Aurora, why don't you go to hell?" The next instant Troy shoved her away, hard. She hit the ground, a sharp stone jamming into the old rib injury. Blood seeped through the fabric at once. Before she could even catch her breath, Troy's hand closed around her throat. Chapter 8. Molly Pearson, who gave you the right to hurt Aurora in front of me? But when Troy saw Molly's shirt bloom red in an instant, he froze. Her tears fell onto the back of his hand. As if scalded, he snatched it away. "Molly," his voice came out dry and rough. He couldn't go on. They had been married 3 years, and this was the first time he had seen that kind of grief on her face. After a beat, he said, "I'll make it up to you." "Make it up? With what?" Molly's voice shook, hoarse and thin. "Troy, the blast she set off just now destroyed the handprints my parents and I pressed into the concrete when the park was built. There was only one set." His pupils tightened. He opened his mouth. Aurora gave a short, cold laugh. One cheek was inflamed, but her eyes still held unbending pride. Troy, you told me as long as I came back, you'd support whatever I did. A small, disappointed smile tugged at her lips. I must have expected too much. She turned and strode off. Troy hurried after her to explain. At the edge of the site, Aurora's foot slipped and she stumbled into a half-demolished statue. A crash split the air. Troy shouted, his voice breaking, and the statue slammed down on the two of them. Blood splattered across the angel's face, the gentle face carved in Molly's mother's likeness staining it red. Outside the OR, Aurora, unscathed, sat calmly in a chair as if the blood soaking her clothes were only spilled paint. Molly, who still held the title of Troy's wife, had to choke down painkillers and handle the paperwork and aftermath. Mid-surgery, a nurse hurried out. The blood bank is low. We need an A-type donor for Mr. Pollard. Molly saw Aurora's lashes flicker, but she stayed silent. Molly's tone went cold. Mr. Pollard was hurt because of you. Aren't you going to donate? Guilt flashed in Aurora's eyes and vanished beneath annoyance and disdain. She answered lightly, my health is poor. Donating wouldn't help anyone. It would only hurt me. Besides, I doubt Troy would want me to make that kind of sacrifice. Molly's lips curved in a soundless, bitter laugh. In the end, Troy's assistant arrived and gave blood. When the operation finished, Aurora wouldn't even follow the gurney upstairs. She headed straight for the exit. The assistant stepped in her way, unhappy. Ms. Lynch, Mr. Pollard was hurt because of you. You're just leaving. She glanced at Troy's pale face. I stayed through the surgery. That's enough repayment. She walked away without looking back. Molly looked at Troy twisting in pain on the bed and felt his grand devotion was nothing but a joke. Whether he and Aurora tore each other apart next or chose to keep being a miserable pair had nothing to do with her. She followed the gurney to the ward, then went to get her own wounds dressed. After that she headed to the shuttered amusement park, packed everything tied to her parents, and shipped it away. By the time she finished, 2 days had gone by. She went out to move the remainder of her father's settlement into an overseas account. She never expected that the moment she stepped onto the street, a van screeched up and snatched her inside. After what happened last time, she had learned to hold her breath. She went limp and pretended to pass out while keeping her eyes slitted, mapping every turn. When the road turned rough and the van began climbing into the hills, its rear obscured from view, she finally opened her eyes. Aurora was beside her, wrists and ankles bound, mouth taped. Aurora's pleading gaze met hers. Molly looked away, slid out the box cutter she had hidden during the frisk, and began sawing at the rope. She was halfway through when a kidnapper turned with his phone. Molly shut her eyes again. His voice carried as he recorded a video for Troy. Mr. Pollard, we've got your wife and the woman you pined for. Think carefully. You can only save one. Who's it going to be? Chapter 9. Name your price. I'll pay whatever you want. I want them both back. Troy tried to sound calm, but the tremor in his words gave him away. The kidnapper laughed. We don't want money. We want you to taste losing the one you love. One is your new favorite, the other your old flame. Choose, or they both die. He ripped the tape from both women's mouths. Aurora couldn't hold her composure anymore. She screamed, panic-stricken, Troy, save me, please. I don't want to die. Troy stopped, hesitating. Let Aurora go. Molly's hand faltered for a heartbeat, then worked faster. She had never expected anything from him, but the coldness still hollowed her out. Fortunately, she had never planned to rely on him. While the kidnappers were still haggling with Troy, Molly shoved the door open, jumped, and tumbled down the slope. Aurora's shrill cry, "She's running," chased her as Molly scrambled to her feet and ran for the road. She ran until the soles of her feet were raw and bleeding, ran until exhaustion erased thought and left only instinct. She finally burst onto a highway, where a kind passer-by drove her to a police station. After giving her statement and getting her cuts cleaned, Molly went home. The private investigator's package was waiting. Heart-hammering, she flipped page after page. With each line, her stomach sank. The date stamped the day before her father fell from the building. The whole picture snapped into focus. Melissa Pollard, Troy's mother, had been one of the main hands behind the Pearsons' collapse. She had done it for a spotless reputation as a benefactor, and for the manufacturing lines the Pearsons had built over decades. She had destroyed the paper trail, pushed Molly into the Pollard marriage, and kept the truth buried for 3 full years. No wonder her father had chosen to jump just as hope seemed within reach, leaving one final settlement behind. A man who loved his daughter more than life wouldn't keep watching her be led into a den of wolves. Molly slid to the floor and wept a raw, cathartic release of all the pain she had endured, then grabbed the dossier and headed for the airport. Just before boarding, Troy called, furious. "Molly Pearson, I thought you were only jealous of Aurora, but you're vicious enough to bail at the critical moment and leave her in danger. Do you even realize, Troy Pollard," she cut in, "you provoked your enemies. You should pay for it." She hung up, got on the plane, and left the country. She landed the next morning. When she turned her phone on, Troy's missed calls and messages flooded the screen until her phone nearly bricked. She ignored them and used most of her cash to commission thousands of AI-generated reconstructions using the raw clips every instance of Troy and Aurora hurting her and pushed them out across the entire web through automated scheduling. That night, the domestic internet buckled. Chapter 10. This was an all-in gamble on the rest of her life. If she couldn't force the Pollards to face consequences, she would have to hide overseas like a ghost. She had no choice. And she won. Netizens began creating their own hashtags and pushing them into the trending lists. Hashtag Troy Pollard and Aurora Lynch a trash hash. Graceful little fairy. More like a sugar-coated snake with fake innocence. Every topic swelled with righteous comments. For every post the Pollard PR team reported and took down, thousands more appeared. Then came the backlash. Am I the only one who remembers Troy being forced to marry Molly, and Aurora being driven overseas to marry someone else? If Molly didn't pull strings, why would 2 people in love split up? I run in the same circles as Troy. Everyone knows how money-hungry Molly is. I bet those so-called proofs of abuse were all consensual. We have questions, Molly. Do a live stream if you dare. Molly read every comment, every insult and smear. Her heartbeat stayed steady. The funnel was working. What came next? The livestream was the real show. She registered a new account behind a masked location. Her first post was a repost of a comment demanding she go live, captioned, "Fine. I'll go live." She tipped off domestic and international reporters and seeded the news. In half a day, reservations for the stream crossed 100 million. Then she posted again, tagging the Pollard Group's official account, "You want the truth? I can give it. The truth I want, will you give me that?" The story hit a peak. Troy's assistant knew the dam was breaking and kept calling, but Troy didn't answer. He had his phone on silent and was sitting in the hospital with Aurora. When Molly jumped, the kidnappers had vented their rage on Aurora. By the time Troy screeched in, she was being dragged across the ground, cool, pretty face stamped with mottled palm marks. The good news was nothing worse had happened. The bad news was the shock had been severe. When Troy scooped her up, nails dug into his shoulder until they drew blood. Her voice was winter cold. "If Molly hadn't jumped, I wouldn't have suffered this humiliation. Make them pay for me, Troy, or I'll never forgive you." Feeling her fingers bite down harder, Troy couldn't name what churned in his chest. The kidnappers had included a former partner from when he founded his own company. After a restructuring, that partner had been forced out. When his wife had complications during labor, he didn't have the money to cover the surgery. She died on the table. Troy had sent money and supplies later so the man could raise their frail daughter, but the man's hatred had only festered. It culminated in the kidnapping of both women. So yes, Troy felt guilty toward Molly. If he hadn't decided to abandon her, she wouldn't have risked that jump and put herself in danger. Chapter 11. And yet anger burned too, because Molly hadn't trusted him. His people had been almost there. If she had let him talk a minute more, he could have stalled until the rescue closed in. Instead, she jumped, and Aurora got hurt. With that in mind, he called Molly. She said a string of things he couldn't even pass, then stopped answering altogether. Even so, beneath the irritation, relief flickered that she had managed to escape. He spent a long time calming Aurora down, then finally exhaled and turned to deal with the wildfire Molly had set. He unlocked his phone to a barrage of messages from his assistant. He frowned and called back. "What happened, sir? Check the internet. Ms. Pearson is blowing everything up." A cold weight dropped in his gut. He opened the news apps. Video after video, Molly's accusations filled the screen. He tapped one at random. Her opening line sounded like she was bleeding. "The day my dad learned the truth about the bankruptcy, he didn't want to live anymore. He jumped from the 10th floor. The awning caught him and he made it to the hospital. I begged Troy for the surgery deposit. He said he'd give it only after I drank myself into a stupor. I did it, but he left to pick up Aurora, and my dad died waiting on the operating table." She lifted her phone at the camera. A ridiculous $1 transfer flashed on the screen. Molly's smile was desolate. "He tosses gifts worth $10 million at Aurora without blinking. The money I begged for half my life was a single dollar." Troy's hand jerked. The phone thudded to the floor. Molly's father was dead, and Troy had killed him. He pressed a fist to his forehead, rifling through memories, what he had said that day, what he had done, why he had sent that single dollar. From the floor, his phone kept playing, unspooling the last 2 weeks like a newsreel. He had sold her to an enemy for the sake of a book. He had doused her with 10 buckets of foul, cleansing water and infected her wound. He had used her private photos to force her into leniency for the men who hurt her. He had razed the park her parents left her, then blamed her when the kidnappers turned on Aurora. On and on they marched before his eyes. For the first time, he fully grasped what he had done to Molly. He wanted to tell himself he hadn't known Cameron was her mortal enemy, that he hadn't known the water would infect her wound, but which of those acts had not come from his own orders? Back then, currying favor with Aurora, he had never thought himself wrong. Now, hearing Molly's ragged, shaking voice, he finally saw how monstrously wrong he had been. And then, as the video ended, he talked himself out of it again. If Molly hadn't pushed Aurora aside, Aurora would never have left the country, would never have suffered through a bad marriage and a divorce, would never have turned from a woman full of life into someone so remote and drained. Chapter 12. In his head, it made sense, again. Yes, Molly and the Pearsons had made him suffer 3 years of separation from the woman he loved. It was their fault. The ending they faced now was nothing more than what they deserved. Troy lowered his eyes to his phone wallpaper, a clipped passage from the letters he used to exchange with Aurora when they were pen pals. Whenever his mind spun out, he would stare at those lines until he calmed. Aurora was his medicine, his salvation, the only woman he loved. He took several long breaths, then ordered his assistant to find Molly at all costs. He had PR pull an all-nighter to draft countermeasures. As for him, he opened a recorder when Molly's livestream began, waiting to see what trick she planned to pull. What appeared instead was a stark white hospital room. Molly sat on the bed in a sports bra and shorts, IV line in her arm. She gave the camera a wan smile. "Sorry, everyone. After days of traveling, my condition worsened. I can only talk to you from here." Across her pale skin and thin frame were surgery scars, wounds from the fall, and the marks left by the kidnapping, so many that it made viewers flinch. Her expression hardened. "I'm going live today to bring an old story into the light. The Pearsons didn't collapse because of Cameron Smith alone. The real hand behind it included the Pollard's Mrs. Pollard in particular." Her voice landed like a hammer straight on Troy's heart. He'd always been unflappable. Since taking over the Pollard group, he had handled every crisis with precision. But staring at the bloody evidence Molly displayed, he went still, weak, breathless. The records showed that 3 years ago Melissa's account had an extra transfer money paid to a Pearson rival. Her confidant had also cut a deal with that rival and poached a key partner from the Pearsons' supply chain. On top of that, they had bribed senior staff in the Pearsons group to steal their next stage operating plan. Time had passed, and the Pollards were powerful. Everything had been done cleanly, leaving him nearly clear of direct blame. The documents weren't enough to convict on their own. But Troy was a Pollard. He knew exactly what he was looking at. He didn't dare meet the gaze burning from the screen. Her cool voice, heavy with hatred, drilled into his ear all the same. Troy Pollard, I married into your family with a clear conscience. And you, can you tell me, did my disasters all begin with you and your mother? He fumbled the live stream closed and gripped his phone, tapping his forehead against his fist again and again. If he had blamed the wrong people from the start, then what in God's name had he done to Molly? His chest tightened. His surgical wounds flared with pain. He needed his pain pump, needed Aurora to quiet him down so he could think. He hurried toward Aurora's room. But just then, a message flashed from his assistant. Mr. Pollard, I think you should know, Aurora and her ex-husband have known each other for years before their marriage. You know him well too. Chapter 13. Aurora woke in the middle of the night with a prickle of unease. She opened her eyes to find Troy standing over her bed, a towering, shadowed figure in the dark. Her heart lurched, an angry curse hovered on her tongue, but she swallowed it, remembering the persona she had so carefully maintained. She forced her pulse into something calm. What is it? She asked, knitting her brows. Why are you just standing there, not saying anything? Troy didn't answer. He only watched her face. Aurora's looks weren't strikingly sharp, nor the polished elegance of an old-money debutante. Compared to Molly's bright, refined features, she was ordinary. But after she hooked up with Troy, he'd poured money into facials, wardrobes, tutors refining her until she could pass for a cultivated socialite. In a life filled with schemes and knives, Troy had found his only pocket of quiet beside Aurora. But now, his sedative, his pain pump, had failed. She waited, breathing in the harsh scent of smoke on him, and irritation crept up her spine. You smell like cigarettes. I don't like it. Change your clothes. This time, the man who normally catered to her every whim didn't move. Instead he asked, almost idly, 3 years ago, how did you know I was getting married? It's ancient history. I've forgiven the hurt you caused me. Why dig it up now? She said coolly, though beneath the blanket her fingernails bit into her palm. She didn't know what answer he wanted, but the way he stood there terrified her, like a wolf king coiled to spring, ready to snap a neck. Her neck. She didn't realize how nakedly that her fear showed. Troy saw all of it. He had become CEO at 20. His instincts were razor sharp. If he had ever thought Aurora flawless, it was because love had blurred his vision. Now, with fresh findings in his head, he felt no trace of pity. Meeting her panicked eyes, Troy clamped a hand around her throat and drove her back onto the mattress. His grip was iron, pressing until she could barely draw breath. She could no longer maintain her ethereal and detached persona. The elegance on her face twisted into frantic struggle and desperate pleas. Troy, let me go. She slapped, scratched, and pinched his hand, trying to free herself. But he didn't seem to feel her nails. He only looked down at her the way one looks at a bug, the curve of his mouth cruel. Chapter 14. 3 years ago, he said at last, when stars were bursting in her vision, my wedding was a secret. I told no one. His words sent a chill down her spine. He released her and stroked her cheek instead, gentle in motion, obscene in effect. Yet, she only felt death was near. The wedding was hidden from you on purpose, he went on, bored and soft. Other than close friends and the Pollard family, not even a fly could get into that venue. So how did you find out, and how did you get word to me that you were leaving? For 3 years, it was like you vanished. No matter how hard I searched, you were nowhere. How did you slip a net that spans the globe? And then, why reappear precisely on the day Molly's father fell? How did my assistant happen to see you and happen to call me away at that exact moment, distracting me until I missed the window to transfer the surgery deposit? His questions came one after another, pressure ratcheting up. Aurora shook her head over, and no sound came out at all. Tears slipped free. Despair thickened the air. He almost laughed. When he had loved her, anything she said had been gospel. He would have gutted himself and thanked her for the privilege. Stripped of that lens, she was riddled with holes. The Pollard network moved. The results came fast. Aurora's ex-husband turned out to be the son of Cameron's wife's distant relative. He was also Aurora's elementary school classmate, childhood sweetheart. Her arrival in Troy's life had been a custom-built con. Her tastes, the way they first met, even the page she had opened in the book that day, everything had been staged for him. Back then the Pollard clan had been locked in a years-long internal fight. Troy's father lived at the office and ignored the family. Melissa and Troy's father had battled for years and worn each other out. Troy had grown up in a cold house, starved for love. Right then, he found a pen pal. Her letters blew through him like spring breeze, soothing his irritation. After years of exchanging pages, he asked to meet. He waited at the bookstore and met a girl in a white dress, Aurora. He chased her hard from that day on, desperate to keep that sliver of moonlight for himself. But Aurora kept refusing. "I love freedom," she told him plainly. "I won't lock myself in some mansion and become a slave to marriage and love." The line hit him square in the heart. She kept preaching that love mattered more than power. Thus, unloved as he was, Troy was utterly convinced, even willing to give up his heir's seat. But looking back now, his father's health was failing then. The two strongest contenders were Troy and his uncle, Colin Pollard. If Troy stepped down, Colin would profit most. Conveniently, Aurora's ex-husband had once been one of Colin's most capable lieutenants. Who would understand Troy's needs better than the uncle who had watched him grow, tremor in the Pollard house? Chapter 15. The 5 years Troy chased Aurora and the 3 years after, when he hurt Molly because of her 8 whole years, had been one trap against Troy set by Colin and the others. Molly was the innocent one. The most brutal blow of all, her father's fatal fall, had been arranged by Colin, just to break her spirit and make space for Aurora. After Troy became CEO, Colin's years of quiet scheming had gone up in smoke, and he wasn't about to let Troy have peace. He wanted to ride the Pearsons' ruin, with Aurora's help, to stage a comeback. Troy thought of all this and knew the truth. He had wronged Molly. He stood, wiped his hands with a handkerchief as if he could scrub off the stain, and looked to his security team, eyes gone cold. Take Aurora away. Make her feel everything Molly endured twice over. The week that followed was a waking nightmare for Aurora. Day 1. They strapped Aurora to a bungee platform 10 meters high and made her jump 10 times before letting her down. She retched until her throat tore and wasn't given so much as a warm cup of water. Day 2. They tied her to a chair in the courtyard and dumped 100 buckets over her head, the same foul, cleansing water she'd once touted, nothing but filthy water. She stank so badly she passed out from the shock and stench. She clung to half a life and spent 3 days in the ICU before she could be discharged. On the 6th day they pumped her with stimulants and nutrients and dragged her to the alma mater where she had once given speeches. In front of the whole world they ripped off the mask. She wasn't a graduate of any prestigious program. She was a middle school dropout turned hustler, recruited and trained by Cameron to parrot pretty lies. Her reputation imploded, switching to extreme notoriety. By then her mind had started to crack, but Troy had no intention of stopping. On the last day he had her ex-husband flown back from overseas. They were both drugged, frigging before cameras. The stream went live to millions. When Aurora woke and saw her disgrace everywhere, she laughed and sobbed like a madwoman. She ran for the roof, and the guards, placed there by Troy in advance, hauled her back. She stared at Troy, lounging in a chair and smoking as if none of it mattered, and screamed, "Troy, I'm no mastermind. Even if I'm guilty, why do this to me?" He crushed the cigarette against her ex-husband's cheek. As the man screamed, Troy smiled. "Don't rush, one at a time. I'll take back everything you took from me, piece by piece." He rose and told the guards, "Watch her. If she dies, I won't spare you." A chorus of, "Yes, sir," followed him to the door. Behind him, Aurora let out a strange laugh. "You'll regret this, Troy. You'll pay dearly for what you've done." He paused but didn't turn. "I don't regret." He walked out, never seeing the venom and relief in her eyes, or hearing the whisper that followed, "You nearly killed the woman you love with your own hands." Chapter 16. Even after he left, the mocking look Aurora'd shot him wouldn't leave his head. A tight unease coiled in his chest, as if everything was about to spin out of control. But he had no time to chase the feeling, cause the company was in free fall. A full week had passed since Molly's livestream. The Pollard tech team still couldn't locate her. Word was that wherever she was staying, someone had built a firewall around her, feeding her a constantly shifting virtual IP to keep her untraceable. The damage from her exposés was catastrophic. Consumers boycotted Pollard products and processed mass refunds. Long-term partners, reading the room, tore up contracts and paid penalties to cut ties. In just 1 week, the group's reputation cratered. Market cap evaporated. Shareholders rebelled. Some openly dumped stock. A few elder executives who had watched Troy grow up even called a vote for his removal. But Troy, though only 30, had learned early. If he wasn't ruthless and indispensable to the family, he would be discarded one day. His counterstroke blindsided even the old guard. He crushed the descent with thunderbolt speed. The price was a week without real sleep, running on cigarettes and coffee. He wasn't a heavy smoker and hated the smell on his clothes, for it could affect his image in negotiations. But in 7 days he smoked what he'd normally smoke in 6 months. The room turned into a haze. He averaged less than 4 hours of sleep a night, burning his life as fuel. The staff grumbled about Molly, but Troy shut him all down. He wasn't a saint. He had resented her ruthlessness. Then he remembered the wounds on her body, and the resentment died like a flame doused in ice water. They were debts he owed. He could never repay them. He pushed for 3 more days. When the crisis finally stabilized, shrunken, but stable, he let himself breathe. The moment he stood, pain knotted his stomach and dropped him back into the chair. His lungs burned. His throat itched and tore with every cough. He curled on the floor, fist pressed to his abdomen, coughing and cramping until a dark splash stained the tiles and his vision went black. His assistant roused him the next morning, face drawn. "Sir, you've been pushing yourself too hard lately. You can't keep this up. Let me take you to the hospital." Troy shook his head. "The family's in turmoil. Everyone's watching, especially my uncle. He's a viper who plays dirty. If I show up at the hospital, he'll scent blood." He let the assistant help him up, staggered into the office bathroom to shower and change, swallowed a handful of pills, and, once his body had steadied a little, said he was going to the old Pollard estate. Chapter 17. On the drive over, Troy pressed a hand to his aching stomach and rasped to his assistant, "When Molly fell from that balcony, do you think her pain was 100 times worse than this?" The assistant didn't answer that. Instead, he mentioned something that seemed unrelated. "Sir, when you were hurt at the park saving Aurora, she left as soon as your surgery ended, while Ms. Pearson took painkillers and sat up half the night to make sure you were okay." Troy listened, and felt a needle-like pain prickling densely in his heart, stealing his breath. The park incident made him feel terrible for Molly. If he had known what that place meant to her, he would never have agreed to Aurora's demand, even though he was still in love with Aurora then. What stunned him most was that, after everything he had done, Molly had still stayed to watch over him at the hospital. In contrast, the woman he'd put his whole heart in and spoiled as much as possible, had never cared for his devotion and affection. At this moment, all the harsh treatment he had inflicted on Molly surfaced in his mind, mocking him for being blind and deaf. If he could go back 3 years and meet Molly again for the first time, he would have treated her like treasure. Failing that, he almost wished he could suffer every cruelty he dealt her, one by one. Only if he suffered the same pain could she perhaps feel vindicated, could she perhaps forgive him. But he couldn't collapse. His branch of the family hung on him. He couldn't throw the company away out of guilt. What he could do was help Molly get justice. By the time his thoughts settled, the car was turning into the old Pollard estate. Once a grand 100-year mansion, it looked drained of life now. Iron fencing ringed the grounds. Guards patrolled the perimeter. Inside, cutting-edge signal jammers blocked the outside world. No device could connect, only play what was already downloaded. So when Troy stepped into the house, Melissa, close to cracking after a week of isolation, lunged for him and grabbed his lapels. Troy, you've kept me locked up for a week. When are you letting me out? She had never lived like this. At her parents' she had known no hardship. After the arranged marriage, Troy's father, even without love, had never mistreated her. She had been the envy of their circle, wealthy, leisurely, respected by her husband, with a successful son. Now her social life severed without warning, panic had eaten her raw. What happened out there? She demanded. Do you know how the circle will look down on me if you keep me shut in like this? You, scared? Troy interrupted the woman who could no longer maintain her dignified facade, his voice sounding somewhat distant. What? Melissa was stunned, unsure what he meant. Troy replied, that's how Molly felt when you helped ruin her family. The words froze the room, stealing her voice. Melissa stared at her son, her own blood, breathing hard, a nameless dread creeping over her. Chapter 18. She loosened her grip and staggered back 2 steps. You know, not just me, Troy said, advancing. The world knows the Pollard matriarch helped wreck another family for the sake of her only son. For 3 years Molly put you first, if not at your side every day, then always doing her duty as a daughter-in-law. You hid the truth from me, and I said nothing. But how could you sit there and watch her bow and scrape in front of you without any guilt? Frost edged his words by the end, his jaw tight with barely checked fury. Under that pressure, and the strain of the past week, Melissa cracked. She completely lost her composure, her voice turning shrill. I did it all for you. Her voice wavered. On paper you're my only son, but your father has other boys out there, about your age. You were so restless back then, saying you'd run after Aurora and leave everything behind. If I didn't hold the line, what then? As she spoke, she broke down into sobs, startling Troy. In all his life he had seen his mother cry only twice, when she first discovered his father's affair, and after Troy's car crash. Now tears poured down her face. I only meant to trip the Pearsons, forcing Mr. Pearson to marry his daughter into our family, she choked out. Who could have guessed? She swallowed hard, guilt devouring her. Who could have guessed they'd go bankrupt? Troy understood the rest. She had been used, set up as the perfect fall guy. He exhaled. From today, you stay here. Pray and reflect. I'll start pulling the people and the equipment out, but stop trusting Emmy Pollard. Emmy, Melissa's closest friend, had married Troy's uncle, Colin Pollard. Melissa wasn't stupid. Sheltered, yes, but she understood what his words implied. She had borrowed Emmy's connections to trip the Pearsons. Her dearest friend had lied to her, for her husband. Melissa sank onto the sofa, staring, shame and disbelief draining the color from her face. Irritated and done talking, Troy loosened his tie and turned to go. Suddenly, a white envelope on the table caught his eye. The tidy handwriting made his heart lurch. He lifted it carefully. Inside lay a thin bank card. He stared at the words, debt owed, and his voice went ragged. Mom, who gave you this? He prayed for any other name. The one he didn't want to hear slid into his ear anyway. No wonder Aurora had promised he would regret it. Troy swayed, then bolted, ignoring Melissa's frightened calls. He tore into the apartment he'd gifted Molly when they got married and searched for anything of hers. Nothing. The place was spotless, devoid of a woman's presence. It could have been a model unit shown to buyers, not a home lived in by a married couple for 3 years. Still, he clung to a shred of unrealistic hope and ripped the room apart, checking even beneath the rugs. Chapter 19. In a corner of the study he finally uncovered a little ledger, trimmed and bound from scrap printer paper. He opened it. The handwriting was neat and gentle, steady with a thread of steel, much like herself. It recorded, March 18th, did 25 chores. $2.50. March 19th, felt sick. Bought the cheapest cold medicine. 50 cents. March 20th, my former teacher wants to buy my painting, the one I used to like best. Could fetch 100,000 now. I'm so happy. I hope more chances come. Opening square bracket ellipsis closing square bracket. It was less an expense book than a private record of her days, her heart. Troy gripped the pages, and an invisible hand squeezed his chest over and over. He had heard of Molly before, the most elegant red rose in their circle, the unyielding dancer on stage, the prodigy steeped in books. Had her family not met with disaster, Molly, raised with such care by her father, would have blazed a future he could hardly imagine. All of it ended in a single conspiracy, out of his mother's selfishness and his own misdirected anger. On the last page a fresh line of tiny print waited. Troy Pollard, if you're reading this, we're finished, no peace until death, and we'll never meet again. He slid to the floor as despair flooded him. So, she had recognized him long ago. He had been blind enough to miss the one love that mattered. Meander, the pen name cool, poised, bright with youth. How could that have ever been the ordinary? Aurora, agony tore through him. He coughed up a mouthful of blood and blacked out. A year later, in a little town that smelled of flowers. Molly wore a long-sleeved dress and smiled softly at the blooms she had planted by hand. They weren't rare, she'd bought them for a few dollars from children picking wildflowers on a day trip, but she cherished every plant, tending each one herself and painting its pot with her own hands. Because they meant life, as well as freedom. Those 3 dark years felt far behind her, but in truth they clung like burrs, the old wounds that throbbed in the rain, the scars that no amount of money could erase, the heart-wrenching memories on her father's anniversary. What healed her, slowly, was the little cafe she had opened in a foreign town. No one here knew who she had been or judged what she had endured. People only kindly praised her beautiful flowers, her fragrant coffee, the interesting activities she hosted, her exquisite paintings. Here, she could be the spoiled, carefree daughter she had been before everything fell apart. The joke, if there was one, was that the meander Aurora had worked so hard to imitate but still performed awkwardly, had been simply an ordinary part of Molly's life. How Aurora had gotten the old letters, Molly didn't know. Aurora had learned the surface, but not the roots, the upbringing, the education, the disposition and abilities forged by her father's love and wealth. Troy had only ever fallen for the imitation, and never saw the truth. Chapter 20. A breeze stirred the incense before her. A tall figure stepped to her side, bending naturally to lift the planter. His voice was warm as sunlight. Your back's acting up again. Let me carry it. Balcony or... She smiled the moment she saw him. Not the balcony. Next door, to Mrs. Sutton's. She said she wants a little fragrance. Byron George let his gaze rest on her smile for a few seconds, then curved his lips and nodded. This wasn't the same town she had fled to when she first went live. It was a neighborhood Byron had carefully chosen for her later mostly English-speaking families, many elders who didn't use the internet, and younger folks who, knowing her story, STLL kept their kindness and their silence. Here, Molly could rest. Byron's identity was a story of its own. Molly had had 2 pen pals. One was Troy, the other was Byron, who had reached out after everything went wrong. She had discovered Troy's identity only right before she left. Her mind was frayed then, and the thought that the pen pal she had most wanted to meet as a girl had been contaminated sickened her. Her world felt empty, and she no longer dared to entrust her heart to anyone. So when she bumped into Byron while working part-time in a cafe abroad, she didn't dare acknowledge him. She was terrified of being hurt again. He recognized her first, from the handwriting on the English wish notes she wrote for customers. He waited outside after her shift, hoping to reconnect. Unexpectedly, she reacted strongly, even fleeing in a panic, her voice trembling. He respected the boundary. He kept coming by for coffee now and then and helped her deal with a few troublesome customers when there were language barriers. Slowly, she let her guard down and told him pieces of the past. Maybe it was their shared home country, maybe the years of letters. Either way, they fell back into rhythm quickly. 2 months ago, under the pretense of celebrating her birthday, he put her on a train and brought her here. That same day she was given the cafe, and fell in love with the town. Byron presented a bunch of violets, her favorite, with a glint of boyish pride. Molly, I know you never felt right there. Start fresh here, I'll be with you. At that moment, the ice around her heart finally thawed. She had to admit it, she'd judged Byron by Troy's shadow. Troy had always been guarded, secretive. Even as a pen pal he'd parceled out truths. Byron, raised in a warm home, was the opposite. Steady as his words, gentle as sun. He noticed her wariness of strangers and kept the right distance. He knew what she liked, and what frightened her. Thanks to him, over the past year she had finally begun to walk out of the dark. Chapter 21. Byron helped Molly carry the planters to Mrs. Sutton's place. The aged woman beamed as she welcomed them in. Her children were back in America for a while, and living here alone felt lonely, so she often asked Molly to stop by and keep her company. Molly liked the gentle elder and was happy to sit and chat. They started talking about Mrs. Sutton's kids and grandkids and, before they knew it, the sun had melted into the hills. "I've talked your ears off," Mrs. Sutton said, a little embarrassed. "Why don't you two lovebirds stay for dinner?" Molly blinked and shook her head quickly. "Oh, Mrs. Sutton, we're not a couple. Just friends." Mrs. Sutton paused her step to the kitchen, then peered at them with her cloudy eyes until they brightened with amusement. "Then I was mistaken," she chuckled. "Come on, I'll make clam chowder. Better than anything a restaurant sells." Molly's cheeks flared red. She pushed her chair back to help, but Byron was already rolling up his sleeves. "I'll prep the ingredients," he said, voice lifting with a teasing lilt. "Molly can be on salad duty." He assigned her the easiest task with a single sentence. She accepted and sat back down. Mrs. Sutton was small, and her furniture had been custom-built low for her. Molly's back injury made bending a bad idea, and Byron hated letting her strain herself. When she watched all 6'2" of him in a floral apron, hunched over the counter, she couldn't help a laugh. He heard her, glanced over, and his mouth curved in a pleased arc. Dinner passed in warm laughter. Mrs. Sutton pleasantly squinted when she smiled. When it grew late and weariness touched the elder's face, Molly and Byron said their goodbyes. The walk home wasn't long. Summer air drifted past with the crystal chirp of kids playing somewhere down the street, light and easy. Feeling the warm presence at her side, Molly remembered Mrs. Sutton's words, the way her gaze had lingered and color rose to her cheeks. "Thanks for today, and, sorry, first time you went over there with me, and it took forever." She lowered her voice. "Don't mind what she said." What if I do want to mind it?" Byron cut in softly, testing the waters, a little shy even as he confessed. "What?" Molly didn't catch it. He turned and looked at her, more serious than she had ever seen him. "Molly, I like you." Even the breeze seemed to slow. His words brushed her ear like a feather, ticklish, not unpleasant. She had never expected him to say it. Heat flooded her face again. She had never dated. As a child she hadn't cared for it. At 18 Cameron's assault had left a shadow. Later, after the Pearsons fell and she married Troy, she hadn't lived a single day that felt like love. Hearing Byron now, her first instinct was to run. She swallowed. "Byron, pretend you didn't say that, okay? Let's not bring it up again." Chapter 22. But this time, Byron, who usually deferred to her in everything, didn't back off. He stepped closer, his eyes unbearably gentle. "Molly, I've liked you since the day I read your words. I'm grateful I got curious and signed up for that online pen pal program. I'm sorry I didn't find you sooner when you needed someone. You went through too much alone." Molly had cut contact with her pen pals after the Pearsons' crisis. She simply had no mind for casual chats with others. They had maintained a rhythm of one letter every 2 months. But later, he stopped receiving replies from Molly. Then, the letters he sent were returned by the post office, and he sensed something was wrong. But because the Pearsons' situation was complicated, and she had been taught by her father since childhood to value privacy, the addresses she used were virtual. Byron had to scrape for clues from fragments in their past letters and tried to find her whereabouts. But in the vast sea of humanity, among billions of people worldwide, he had no leads. He failed for 3 long years. When Molly went live, something in him sparked. He knew it was her. That led to the chance meeting, and then to staying helping her out of the dark, and along the way he fell for her completely. When he finished, Molly went silent. It was a lot. Her mind stuttered, unsure what to say. Seeing her dazed, Byron's throat bobbed. He winced, worried he had rushed her. So he tried to lighten the mood with a laugh, adding, "Honestly, I was just blurting it out." Too abrupt. "I want to try," Molly said suddenly. She lifted her head. Her eyes shone like stars. "I've never dated. I don't even know how to start. If you're willing to, try it with me." "I am." Byron jumped in so fast he nearly bit his tongue. Molly was amused, but she sobered a beat later. "Let's be clear first. I'm not a perfect girlfriend. If it turns out we aren't right, we stay friends. Is that okay?" There was that careful, tentative note in her voice. After her parents, Byron was the closest person in her life. Losing him because of a failed relationship would be a disaster. "Of course," Byron said. "Friends forever." He was a man who kept his word. Molly exhaled, testing the waters by slipping her hand into his. His eyes brightened, so warm she had to look away. From that day on, Byron dropped by her cafe even more. The gifts multiplied too. Whenever Molly felt awkward and asked him not to, he would answer solemnly, "It's my duty to spoil my girlfriend." She could only relent, but she had grown up around wealth and could read price tags at a glance. Even the delicate studs he, casually, gave her cost tens of thousands. The starflower planters he found were handmade and priced in the high hundreds. Being cherished warmed her, and weighed on her. Years in that glittering circle had taught her the ways of rich heirs. She never doubted Byron's heart, but she doubted herself. If she, with nearly nothing left, actually married him, what would his family think? Would he change? Chapter 23. The thoughts tangled and wouldn't let go. She hated herself for overthinking, yet she couldn't stop. Without the shelter of the Pearsons, she had to be vigilant in everything to prevent herself from being swallowed up. She didn't know any other way to live. Thankfully, Byron seemed to sense it. That fall, he suggested they fly back to New York to meet his family. "Molly," he said, steady as ever, "I'm the youngest in the George family. I didn't tell you before because I didn't want to pressure you. Now it's time to take you back to meet them. They've known about and liked my pen pal for a long time. If they knew my girlfriend was you, they'd be overjoyed." The George, with a century of history and profound heritage, had influence on par with the Pollards. Molly hadn't expected Byron to be one of them. And yet, it fit. He carried himself with quiet polish, the kind honed by first-rate schools. Even his letters from years ago, bright and lively, had a maturity beyond his age. That he was out of the top drawer wasn't very surprising to her. Under his hopeful gaze, she agreed to go. Joy lit him up. He almost swept her off her feet to spin her around. Remembering her back, he reined it in, grinning like a fool. "Then tomorrow I'll fly over to pick you up." He promptly tripped over his own feet, nearly landed in the flowerbed, and scratched his head, sheepish. Molly giggled, and then rain hammered the windows. She stared. The forecast said today would be the hottest day of the year. "How is it pouring?" Byron looked equally baffled. Either way, going out was impossible. He glanced at her, hopeful. As the rain thickened, she hesitated, then relented. "You can stay the night. There's a spare room." Her voice dwindled to a whisper by the end. The tips of her ears turned scarlet. Normally, he would have teased her. Now his face was even redder than she was, joy sparking in his eyes. He hadn't expected her to actually agree. "I'll make up your bed," she said, retreating inside. Her little cafe had been converted from an apartment, with 2 bedrooms. She used the master. The guest room was covered in plastic and doubled as storage. But it was too rushed today, and only the bedding from Molly's master bedroom was available. Fortunately, she liked clean, simple styles too. She dug out a black and grey set she thought would suit him. On the step ladder, she steadied herself with Byron's arm as she climbed down. "This set is new. I washed it and never used it, so you." Boom. Thunder cracked. Molly flinched and tumbled straight into his arms. Their eyes met. Warmth glowed in him. Her heart skittered, beating out a rhythm that felt dangerously like falling for someone. Byron nuzzled his forehead lightly against hers, cat-like. "I think I'm a little afraid of thunder," he murmured. "Miss Pearson, would you keep me company tonight?" He didn't mention her fear, only phrasing it in a way no one could refuse. Molly hid her face against his chest and mumbled, "Okay." Chapter 24. That night they slept in the master. Molly took the bed and Byron made a pallet on the floor, which was his idea. Even when she worried the floor would be cold in autumn, he insisted it was the most comfortable place in the world. He was always like that, gentle, thoughtful of her in every way. Warmth spread through her. When preparing the dinner, she whipped up a little strawberry cake just for him. He loved desserts, something she'd discovered on one of their outings. Sure enough, he practically purred at the table, as pleased as a cat that had gotten the cream. Her own smile answered him. Thunder usually hollowed her out with fear. Somehow, with him there, the night felt safe. Back in the bedroom, one on the bed and one on the floor, they talked and talked until dawn brushed the curtains. When they boarded the plane the next day, both wore matching purple half-moons under their eyes and fell asleep, heads tipped together. Before landing, Molly set a vibration alarm on her watch, carefully lifted his head from her shoulder, and slipped out to freshen up. A hand caught hers. Byron's sleepy voice followed. "We've got an hour. Where are you going?" "Makeup." She propped his headrest. "Go back to sleep. I'll be quick." He blinked clearly. "You don't need makeup. They won't care." Mumbling, he handed her the makeup bag and took a lipstick out of his own carry-on bag. "But, I brought my mom's favorite shade, just in case. Didn't know if you'd want it." He dropped back into sleep as soon as he handed it over. Something in Molly softened and caved in. Since the bankruptcy she had barely worn makeup. It had been over 4 years now. She was long out of the habit. He didn't want her to feel forced, but he also respected her choice and had already thought through how to win the elders' hearts. She felt very lucky and delighted for that. Although her skills were rusty, she didn't spend much time doing a light face, and returned half an hour later. Byron was gathering their things. "Byron, how is it? Is the makeup okay? Is the dress too much?" Molly looked down at the long dress she was wearing, but didn't hear his reply for a while. She looked up to find him staring, mesmerized, his eyes completely glued to her face. She had never seen that open, ardent gaze on him before. Flustered, she nudged him. "Say something so I know if I need to change." He caught her hand and said with sincere affection, "You're beautiful. More than I imagined. Molly, I've never seen this side of you." He preferred actions over words and rarely spoke sweet nothings to her. The earnestness pulled heat to her cheeks, and left something honey-sweet in her chest. They disembarked and headed for the exit. She had known the George family would send someone, but she hadn't expected Byron's parents themselves. The surprise left her a little breathless. She was even more startled when Byron's mother, Serena George, saw her and couldn't stop the tears and kept whispering, "So alike. She's so alike." Molly went blank and glanced at Byron helplessly, but he looked as puzzled as she felt. His father, Connor George, warm smile, the easy presence of a man used to being in the lead, stepped in to steer the moment and usher them to the car. Byron climbed into the back, until Serena hooked him by the elbow and moved him up front, which left the rear seat to Molly and Serena, side by side. Chapter 25. Serena studied Molly's shy posture and smiled even more gently. "Molly, I'm actually your aunt." Molly blinked and lifted her gaze to the elegantly kept woman who looked barely in her 30s. Her features did bear some resemblance to those of her mother in photographs. She had known that Serena wasn't Byron's birth mother. Connor had married young for business. He and Byron's birth mother, Selena, divorced when Byron was little, but remained compatible business partners and good friends. Serena came later, the true love he had courted for 10 years and then cherished dearly. Molly just hadn't expected Serena to be family, the one related with blood. "My mom's name was Grace Pearson," she asked carefully. "Are you her sister?" Having confirmed what she wanted to know, Serena's smile grew warmer, looking at Molly as if she were her own child. "Yes, we were twin sisters, adopted by different families and separated for years. My name now is Serena." She paused, a touch more pity in her eyes. "Sweetheart, you've suffered long enough." The words unlocked Molly. She folded into Serena's arms and cried quietly, the way people do when grief has taught them to swallow their own sound. Serena patted her back and waited until the storm passed. When Molly sat up, embarrassed by the damp on Serena's blouse, Serena shook her head. It's all right, Molly, just treat me like your mother, don't feel embarrassed. Molly, I raised one boy and gave birth to another, but I never had the fortune of having a daughter. Now that you're here, you are my luck. She glanced at Byron in the front seat, watching through the rearview mirror, then added, if Byron doesn't treat you well in the future, and you don't want to be with him anymore, you're still my daughter. Byron groaned. Mom, do you know how hard it was to get Molly my girlfriend? Serena laughed. With my daughter here, you and your father both take a back seat. Connor coughed into his fist and traded a long-suffering look with his son. Molly, touched by such easy warmth, felt the panic and unease that had been suppressed in her heart for so long began to dissipate. After her mother's death, her father had built a beautiful life for her as best he could, but the family had never been whole again. She'd grown up mostly with a nanny while he was busy with work. The air at home was somewhat subdued. Later, in the Pollard home, there had been no warmth at all. Now, watching Georges banter, she felt an almost surreal sense of having stepped into a different world. She couldn't help but chuckle to herself. It's wonderful. Finally, I have a home again. The car stopped outside the George villa, where a middle-aged woman and a boy of 7 or 8 waited at the gate. Seeing them get out, the child wriggled free and barreled into Serena's arms. He looked up and chirped, Mom, you're back. Serena ruffled his hair, then tipped his chin toward Molly. The boy grape dark eyes so like Byron's looked at her with unabashed curiosity and liking. At Serena's prompt, he approached and offered a solemn greeting. Hello, miss. You're so gorgeous. I'm Spencer George, Byron's little brother. Molly was amused. She bent down and shook his hand with equal ceremony. A poised woman with restrained elegance stepped forward. Hello, young lady. I'm Byron's birth mother. You can just call me Selena. With that, she reached to greet Molly. Molly clasped Selena's hand with respect. Selena's smile held only kindness. No need to be nervous. As a mother, I'm glad Byron's with you. After all, he's been obsessed with you for a long time. Molly had lost count of how many times she'd blushed that day. Byron's family was kinder and gentler than she'd dared imagine. Especially when Serena and Selena were walking together, one was passionate as fire, the other calm as water, and they got along surprisingly well. Chapter 26. Byron leaned in to whisper, when Dad fell head over heels for Auntie Serena, he worried I'd get in the way and even shipped me off to Mom's. But to his surprise, on the wedding night, he slept in the guest room while Mom and Auntie Serena stayed up talking in the same bed till dawn. The next day when Dad grumbled, Mom just said, her name is Serena, so similar to mine. That's destiny. From now on, we're sisters. Connor heard every word and stared at his son with theatrical betrayal. Molly nudged Byron, whispering to him, your father looks helpless. Should you go comfort him? Byron bit back a smile and shook his head. No need. He's used to it. Ever since Mom and Auntie Serena became best friends, he suffers like this regularly. Connor looked even more helpless. Dinner to welcome Molly was held at the stylish new restaurant Selena co-owned with her husband. The meal was enjoyed by all. Here, Molly experienced the treatment of being the center of attention. Dishes Molly liked drifted toward her plate without fanfare, for fear that she might not dare to serve herself due to feeling out of place. Whenever she spoke, everyone set down forks and listened, including Spencer, who usually had more appetite than attention span. The kitchen had been briefed on flavors she disliked. Nothing on the table gave an unpleasant scent. Everyone was using their own ways to help Molly feel at ease. She felt warm inside. For the first time, Molly let herself wonder if marrying Byron might be a good thing. She wasn't naive. Her first marriage had seared its lessons into the bone. She refused to walk into another terrible family again. After dinner, everyone headed home. Byron's place in the city hadn't been aired out in years, so he brought Molly to the family estate. Upon entering, the familiar setup made her eyes water right away. Probably because Serena and Grace were identical twins, Their tastes and styles in room decoration were very similar. The George house echoed the Pearson home enough to tug open old rooms in her heart. Serena understood at once. "Grace and I were separated at 10, she murmured. "I never knew blood could hold this much." She drew Molly into a hug and patted her shoulder. "Sleep with me tonight, Molly. I'll tell you all Byron's embarrassing childhood stories." "Mom," Byron hissed. "Come on, I have a reputation to maintain." Serena chuckled, deposited Spencer into his arms, and said sweetly, "Watch your brother." She led Molly away, but when the lights went out, Serena told no embarrassing stories. She simply held Molly in arms and lulled her to sleep. Serena's embrace was as warm as Grace's had been. Molly felt as if she had returned to her childhood. In a strange house, Molly slept better than she had since everything fell apart. Sometime near dawn, a single tear slipped into her hair. She pulled her neckline closed and curled up tighter, safe at last. Days at the Georges felt like a royal holiday. She slept until her body woke on its own. The meals were all to her taste. In her free time, she went shopping for clothes with Serena. In the evenings, she immersed herself in New York's stunning nightlife. Stunning nightlife. Byron shelved any plans to parade her before friends since she preferred quiet after those incidents. He focused on driving her around the city, visiting every place that interested her. Through Connor's connections, the family introduced her to a renowned scholar. Soon she was studying calligraphy and painting again. With Georges at her side, she truly stepped out of the dark. Only one string stayed taut: the pull to return to hometown, visit her parents' graves, and stand where she had once lived. But fear chased close behind. What if she ran into Troy again? After her livestream, she had stopped following any Pollard news. Back then, she had gone all in. The Pollards had probably suffered greatly and would surely blame all their misfortunes on her. Chapter 27. As her father's Memorial Day approached, sleep abandoned her. Fortunately, she was used to resting alone. After that first night, Serena honored her habit, and Byron never intruded. So when she sat up all night in her room, no one knew. One restless midnight, increasing agitation drove her to walk outside. She wandered the quiet halls and happened upon Connor and Byron talking in the study. Her name drifted out. Before she could think, she paused at the threshold. For Molly, Connor was saying, "You even picked up the family businesses you'd sworn off." "Good news to me." He stubbed out his cigarette. "When I asked you to take over George Group, you refused and handed your shares to Spencer. I thought you'd roam forever with your cameras." Byron was nothing like his usual light self. His features had sharpened with a serious calm that mirrored his father's. He turned a page in the file and spoke evenly. "I'm keeping both Molly and my dream. Taking the reins is temporary. I need the family's reach to do what I have to do. After what happened, Molly feels kind of uneasy in domestic surroundings. So once the Pollard mess is resolved and our overseas operations are stable, I'll hand everything to Spencer." Connor's mouth twitched into a smile. "They say the apple doesn't fall far. You outdid me. First month in, despite the opposition from those old fogies, you gutted several of the Pollard's core divisions." "Pollards?" Molly's fingers tightened in her sleeves. Confusion and dread crowded her ribs. Byron's laugh was ice. Keeping him away from Molly and ruining his reputation was not enough. He wanted to expand abroad. "Dream on. With me, he will never make it." Connor watched him a long moment before saying quietly, "Be careful. People already grumble that it costs a lot and worths nothing to build and maintain a global firewall around Molly's location. Water spills when the cup is too full. Knowing when to stop is also a wisdom." Byron arched his brow. "But when you were courting Auntie Serena, were you this cautious too?" Connor shot back instantly. "Of course not. Serena deserved the best. Screw the old fogies. Screw the board." Right after he finished speaking, he caught the floor in his own words. Then he couldn't help but laugh in exasperation. Glancing at Byron, who had that knowing look on his face, he gave his son's shoulder a hard slap. "Mom was treated poorly before she was adopted." Byron winced in pain but still smiled. "It was only after meeting you that she started living like a princess. You've been wondering how to make her happier, right?" Here's the solution. Be good to my girlfriend. Connor considered, then nodded, satisfied. You've got my spine. Do what you need. I'll back you up. Byron stepped out and found Molly waiting at the stair landing, eyes bright with tears. Molly, you. Byron, she blurted, let's get married. He couldn't believe his ears. What? I said. Byron George, let's get married. The words felt like spring breaking through frost, an arrow of warmth straight into his heart. He gripped her shoulders, eyes blazing. Molly, I didn't hear you clearly. Say it again, please. She giggled at the boy in him. I say, let's get married. Say what? He leaned closer, smiling so hard his eyes bent. Marry me, she said, beaming as well. Excuse me, one more time. He teased her into saying it again. Chapter 28. His mouth drifted closer with each repeat, until she rose on her toes and kissed him first. Thank you for loving me, she whispered. I love you too. Let's get married. Unwilling to let her go, he cupped the back of her head and kissed her deep. In the dark, their tears of joy mingled like a scatter of stars. They registered their marriage soon after. Since that all-or-nothing stream, Molly had flinched from the crowd. Due to that, the wedding she once imagined in letters would not happen in this lifetime. But it didn't matter. Byron had saved every single letter she ever sent. He commissioned a renowned jeweler to design a full set of pieces inspired by the wedding she'd described in the letters art to keep forever. Wearing them, they shot a set of bridal portraits, enough to close the circle. Then Byron took her to the Georges family dinner. There, Molly met the main and extended family, dozens of Georges, all under one roof, all in step. No scandals, nothing like the Pollards. Everyone but the hard-of-hearing grandfather had seen the livestream. No one pitied her. Instead, they helped Molly integrate into this large family quickly, friendly and considerate. She had always dreaded big gatherings. Somehow, with him, the fear washed away. She greeted every George, enjoyed the harmonious aura at the dinner, and became, in fact and spirit, a George. It felt like a dream, an ethereal dream that could be taken back at any moment. Then Byron's fingers tightened around hers, and her heart settled. Right then, she decided to make New York home. She would stay with the Georges for the rest of life. Connor, Serena, Spencer, and Byron were all overjoyed upon hearing her decision. So was their old neighbor, Mrs. Sutton. As it turned out, her son had business ties with the Georges and had recently brought her back home for his enterprise got stabilized. Molly went along for the airport pickup. I told you two were a pair, Mrs. Sutton crowed, clapping. They both went scarlet, and smiled at each other, bright with happiness. That night, for the final stop, Molly and Byron flew to bring her parents home. On the plane, Byron told her the truth she had refused to look up. Pollard Group went bankrupt. Colin Pollard's crimes came to light. He fled and fell off a cliff, and his body was never found. Cameron Smith and the others were convicted. Aurora Lynch, unable to bear the humiliation, killed herself by crashing into the prison's wall. As for Troy, he tried to save the group and failed. Now he develops lung and stomach cancer, and is terminally ill. Molly listened and, after a long moment, said only, they deserved it. As she left her parents' graves, Troy happened to arrive to purchase a burial plot for himself. He had wasted a shadow. Blood flecked his lips when he spoke. Please, bury my ashes beside her parents. That way, she might come see me. The clerk grimaced and nodded toward Molly, who was walking away. She already transferred their ashes. Said she's settling somewhere else, never coming back. Troy watched Byron and Molly embracing each other from a distance. A tear of blood trickled from the corner of his eye. He understood then. He didn't even deserve a final glimpse. His head bowed, and didn't rise again, silent forevermore. She comes back, we divorce. The end. And that's a wrap on today's reading here at Booked for Drama. If you felt anything, rage, swoon, secondhand heartbreak, let me know in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with your fellow drama lovers. If you have any requests, drop them in the comments. Until next time. Keep reading, and keep the drama on the page.